Hello everyone, welcome to HFY Beyond Terror. This channel is all about HFY and sci-fi stories, where humanity's underestimated and then proves
the market under Deck 17 never smelled like one thing. It was brine and burnt sugar. It was engine solvent and crushed herbs. It was the sharp sting of ozone from cheap plasma trinkets and the soft, warm scent of bread that had no right to exist this far from any real soil. Elias Mercer threaded through it with his collar half open and his work badge already tucked away. His shift in habitat maintenance had ended, and he had no reason, none at all, to take the long route back to his quarters, except that his quarters were quiet had teeth, on the main promenade. The lights were brighter and the ceilings higher, and people pretended the station was a city instead of a machine. Down here, the walls sweated condensation, the air thrummed with rerouted fans, and nobody bothered polishing their sadness. Elias passed a stall selling fermented kelp in jars that pulsed faintly. A pair of tall, jointed traders argued over a coil of living rope. Someone laughed, someone swore, someone cried into their sleeves and kept walking. He was halfway past the row of scavenger vendors when a glint snagged his attention. Copper, dull as an old penny, catching the light from a flickering sign. He stopped. Between two stalls, on the stained decking by a vent grate, sat a child. Not human. Not even close. A small drake hatchling, 2 legs folded neatly beneath him, tail curled in tight, wings tucked like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. His scales were coppery but dry, as if nobody had rubbed oil into them for weeks. The membrane of one wing showed a healed tear, thin and pale like scar tissue. In front of him, arranged with meticulous care, lay a handful of things that did not belong on the floor of Deck 17, a cracked star map sphere that blinked sporadically, a folded scrap of cloth with an embroidered edge, a child's learning slate with the corners snapped off, and a carved figurine shaped like a ship, its sails chipped, its paint worn away. The hatchling held up the star map sphere to a passing stranger, a tall, masked molluscoid with a basket of spice pods. "Please," the drake said. His voice was so soft Elias almost didn't catch it over the market noise. 7 credits. It still shows the lights if you tap it. The molluscoid emitted a wet clicking sound that might have been amusement and glided away. The hatchling's shoulders didn't slump dramatically. He simply set the sphere back down, exactly where it had been, and smoothed his cloth scrap as if neatness could protect him. Elias shifted closer, pretending interest in a tower of luminous fruit. The vendor didn't bother to pitch. People who wandered Deck 17 with clean boots weren't there to buy fruit. Reptilian merchant from the neighboring stall noticed Elias watching. Her eyes were the color of old glass. "Don't," she said in trade common. Elias glanced at her. "Don't what?" "Don't make that face. You'll only waste it." She nodded toward the hatchling. "He's been squatting there for almost a month. Clan dropped him and burned his mark. No one wants that kind of trouble." Elias felt a pressure behind his ribs. "A month? Where does he sleep?" The merchant shrugged, a slow roll of scaled shoulders. "Vents, service ducts. Anywhere warm enough to not freeze his blood. Drake young can last a while." "That's a kid. He's a drake." Her tone suggested this explained everything. If he can't endure, that's the lesson. Their elders call it the sharpening. Elias looked back. Hatchling was watching the flow of bodies with a battered, careful kind of hope, like someone who had learned not to expect kindness but couldn't stop wanting it. His amber eyes were too big for his narrow face. A group of teenagers, station-born, mixed species, too bold in their boredom, passed and pointed. One kicked the edge of the hatchling's cloth scrap, scattering dust and grit. The drake flinched, quick as a snapped wire, but he didn't lash out. He didn't even look up. He brushed the debris away with a patient precision. Of someone cleaning a wound. Elias didn't plan to move. His legs moved anyway. He crossed the last few meters and knelt beside the little spread of cod belongings up close. The hatchling looked younger than Elias had guessed. 4 standard years, maybe less. His horns were still small nubs, not yet curved into anything threatening. The ridge along his spine was visible because there wasn't enough flesh padding it. Elias kept his voice low. "Hi." The hatchling's gaze flicked to his face, wary and searching. "What's your name?" It was a question the hatchling seemed unprepared for. The drake blinked once, then twice. "Kiva," he said finally. "Sir, do you want to buy something?" "They're good. I keep them clean." Elias picked up the cracked star map sphere. It was cheap plastic with a failing projector, the kind of toy vendors sold to bored children on ferries. When he pressed a seam, it sputtered and painted a jittery constellation across his palm. "How much?" Elias asked. 7 credits, Kiva said quickly, then added, "It's fair." "It's fair price." Elias slid his thumb across his own credit tag and pulled up a transfer screen. "I'll give you 70. Kiva froze. His eyes widened so much the pupils became thin slits of surprise. "No, sir." His claws curled into fists on his knees. "That's wrong." "It's not worth. It's worth 70 to me," Elias said, and kept his tone steady enough to make it true. He tapped confirm. Kiva's tag chirped softly. He stared at the number as if it might evaporate. Elias tucked the sphere into his jacket pocket. "When did you eat last?" "I ate," Kiva said too fast. Elias sat between them, heavy as a drop tool. Elias stood slowly, hands visible, careful not to startle him. "Have a good night, Kiva." He walked away, but not far. 2 stalls down. A food vendor ladled steaming broth into containers and sold skewers that smelled like real protein. Elias bought 2 portions, then a third, then hesitated and bought a small packet of honeyed fruit. When he glanced back, Kiva was still where he'd been counting the transfer. Then counting again, then pressing his claws to his own chest like he needed to feel his heartbeat match the numbers. Then the hatchling gathered his remaining items into a neat bundle and carried them to the same food vendor Elias had just visited. Kiva didn't buy skewers. He bought the cheapest thing on the menu, a pale tube of nutrient gel. He sat back down and ate like a creature who had been starving politely for too long. When the tube was empty, he scraped it with a claw, then licked the inside clean. Elias turned away before the twist in his chest could turn into something worse. That night, Elias sat in his quarters and listened to the station hum. He had lived in 3 habitats, 2 moons and 1 planet-side colony. He could sleep through engine vibration and emergency alarms. He could not sleep through silence. His living space was clean, functional, and too empty. There were no voices beyond his door, no small footsteps, no arguments about bedtime, no one asking him to read the same story twice. 5 years ago, a transport accident had taken his wife and his little boy. Elias had been on a different shuttle. He had been saved. He had not been spared. He took the star map sphere out of his pocket and set it on his table. It flickered, a cheap galaxy stuttering in miniature. He opened his datapad and searched the station database until his eyes burned. Drake hatchling nutrition, Drake social development, Drake clan law, sharpening, mark burning, dishonor. He learned that Drake culture prized endurance so fiercely it had become a knife turned inward. Hatchlings who slowed the flight were left behind. Weakness was treated like contagion. Elias set his jaw. He wasn't Drake, and he wasn't going to pretend. Cruelty became acceptable just because someone called it tradition. The next day, Elias returned to Deck 17 with a warm container cradled in his hands. Kiva was there. exactly where the vents warmed the floor. He was trying to trade the snapped learning slate for a handful of dried seed pods. His head snapped up the moment Elias entered his line of sight. Amber eyes. Hope masked as suspicion. Elias sat down on the decking as if it were a chair in a cafe. He set the container between them. I misjudged my lunch, he said. Can't stand waste. Kiva stared at the container like it might bite. I don't take charity, he said, voice tight. Good, Elias replied. Neither do I. This isn't charity. This is you doing me a favor. He popped the lid. Steam rose-spiced greens. Soft grains and chunks of meat that looked like they had once belonged to an animal that had lived a real life. Kiva's stomach betrayed him with an audible growl. Color darkened along his throat ridges in humiliation. Elias held the container closer. Help me out. Kiva hesitated exactly long enough to prove he was trying to be Drake proud, then hunger won. He ate slower than the day before, carefully, as if manners could keep him from falling apart. But his eyes half closed on the first warm bite. His shoulders lowered by a fraction. When he finished, Elias offered the honeyed fruit packet. Kiva's eyes widened again. Sweet? Yeah, Elias shrugged. Still bad at portions. That was the first day. It became a pattern. Elias showed up after his shift with extra food, soup, protein wraps, baked starch rounds with salt. Always something better than gel. Always enough that Kiva could eat and still look like he wasn't begging. On the fifth day, a human woman from the colony sector stopped him near the stairwell. You know Drakes don't attach the way we do, she said quietly. You're going to get hurt. Elias adjusted his grip on the container. He's a kid. He's Drake. He's a kid, Elias repeated, and went on. By the second week, Kiva watched the corridor for him. Not openly. Never openly. But Elias noticed the way Kiva's gaze snapped toward footsteps, the way his posture softened by a hair when Elias appeared. Kiva spoke a little more each day. His clan had been wandersmiths, repairing old ship hulls and trading forged fittings. They docked at Lattice Station for a coolant overhaul. When they left, Kiva said one evening, staring at his claws, I wasn't with them. Elias waited. I got fever, Kiva said flatly. Needed medicine. Needed. Extra. Kids get sick, Elias said. Kiva looked genuinely confused. Drake hatchlings aren't supposed to. That's not a rule, Elias replied. That's a punishment. Kiva didn't argue. He simply filed the words away, like someone collecting strange coins. Elias taught him how to bargain without letting fear show, how to ask for a fair price, how to walk away. The first time Kiva succeeded, getting a vendor to stop shorting him on scrap, the hatchling's eyes shone with fierce pride. He laughed once. 2. Elias had tried to pronounce a Drake greeting he'd found in an old archive and butchered it so badly Kiva choked on his own bite of bread. The laugh sounded rusty, like a hinge forced open after years of disuse. But it was real. 3 weeks after their first meal together, the station's night cycle turned dangerous. A micrometeor shower struck the outer shielding. Not catastrophic, but enough to rattle the structure and force emergency reroutes. Deck 17 lost heat priority. Lights flickered. Fans stuttered into uneven breaths. Security broadcast shelter orders. Elias sat in his quarters, listening to the alarm tone pulse through the walls, and tried to stay put like a sensible adult. He lasted 12 minutes, then he grabbed a thermal wrap, a portable lamp, and a spare hand warmer from his kit and left. The corridors were dim, half lit by emergency strips. People huddled behind sealed doors, peering out like the station was suddenly a wilderness. Deck 17 felt colder the moment he stepped onto it. Air moved wrong, pushed by failing fans. Dust lifted into small spirals. Kiva's spot was empty. Elias's throat tightened. He searched, calling the hatchling's name, ignoring the stares. Kiva. Nothing. He checked behind stalls, inside half-open storage bays. Finally, he found a maintenance access half hidden behind a noodle vendor's shutter. Inside, Kiva was curled against a pipe that had gone cool. Wrapped around himself so tightly he looked like a single copper knot. The carved ship figurine was clutched to his chest like a talisman. His body shivered hard, enough to rattle the metal. Tears tracked down his snout. Though his jaw was locked like he was trying to bite them back, drakes weren't supposed to cry. Elias knelt. Kiva, he said softly, as if saying it gently could keep the world from breaking him further. Hey, I'm here. Kiva's eyes snapped open. When he recognized Elias, something in him gave way with a sound that wasn't a word, more like the noise a creature makes when it's held its breath too long. Elias wrapped him in the thermal wrap and lifted him carefully, supporting his tail and wings the way he'd learned from a Drake Care manual. Kiva clung to him like Elias was the only solid surface left in the universe. Don't leave. Kiva whispered against his shoulder. I'm not leaving, Elias promised Dot, and for the first time in months. The promise didn't feel like a lie told to comfort a ghost. Kiva woke to real sunlight. Lattice. Station had a botanical ring, one of the few places with transparent panels and honest starshine. Elias's quarters weren't in the ring, but the emergency systems had brightened the habitat lights to mimic dawn after the storm. Kiva blinked, disoriented, then stared at the blankets around him. They were clean. The air was warm. The room smelled like cooking. His stomach growled immediately, loud enough to embarrass him into stillness. Elias appeared with 2 plates. Morning, he said. You hungry? The food was simple eggs, toast, fruit, but it was on real plates, not in tubes. Kiva stared. Why? Because you needed it, Elias said, and sat in a chair that faced him like an anchor. They ate mostly in silence. Afterward, Elias leaned forward, hands clasped. Kiva, I'm going to ask you something. You can say no, but think about it. Kiva's heart hammered. Elias spoke anyway. Stay here. For a while. Until we figure out what's next. The room felt too quiet for the words. Kiva's first instinct was to refuse. Pride had been carved into him like bone. Drakes didn't accept help. Drakes didn't live in other species' nests. Drakes endured, but Kiva was so tired of waking at every footstep. Tired of the cold. Tired of pretending hunger was dignity. My elders said I wasn't fit, he whispered. If I stay, it proves them right. No, Elias said gently. It proves you're smart enough to accept safety when it's offered. Other drakes would hate him for it. Elias's voice didn't waver. I'm not other drakes. Kiva stared at his scratched claws. Then he thought of Elias searching for him when everyone else stayed behind their doors. Just a while? He asked. Elias's eyes softened. Just a while. The medical center confirmed what Elias already knew. Malnutrition, dehydration, minor infections. Stress so chronic it had become Kiva's default breath. Dr. Amani Chogray hair. Steady hands spoke quietly while Kiva sat on the exam table swinging his tail like he didn't know what else to do with it. With proper care, she said, he'll recover. He's resilient, but he shouldn't be back on deck 17. When she turned to Kiva, her smile was small but warm. You're going to be okay, sweetheart. Kiva didn't know what to do with the word. It lodged in his chest and glowed faintly. Confusing and comforting. That evening, human neighbors appeared with offerings like an old ritual. A heat lamp. A bundle of soft towels. Children's books. A reinforced cushion for Kiva's tail. Someone left a small jar of scale oil and a note that said, no one should be itchy on principle. Kiva was overwhelmed. Drakes didn't gather to help. They gathered to judge. Humans gathered and smiled. At dinner, Elias hosted other families. Their kids asked Kiva about flying and fire and whether his scales were hot like a stove. "I'm too young for fire," Kiva admitted. And the children reacted like this was delightful news. Not a shame. They ate loudly, messily, with laughter. A child spilled water and was met with chuckles, not punishment. Kiva watched it all like a traveler on a foreign planet. Later, Elias showed him a small room, a bed, a shelf, a heat lamp glowing in the corner. "This is yours," Elias said. "As long as you're here." Kiva's voice shook. "Why do you care? I'm a failed hatchling." Elias knelt so they were eye level. 5 years ago," he said, "I lost my family. I've been alive, but not living." Kiva's eyes widened. Elias reached out slowly, giving Kiva time to flinch away. Kiva didn't. Elias's hand rested gently on the crown of his head. "Then I saw a kid trying to survive alone, and it reminded me that I'm still here for a reason." Kiva swallowed. "I don't understand humans." "That's okay," Elias said. "You don't have to understand. Just let yourself be safe." Kiva nodded barely. "I can try." That night, he slept in a real bed for the first time in his life. The summons arrived 3 weeks later. Station Council. Guardianship Review. Cultural Petition. Elias read it once, then again. And his face went still in that careful way people did when they were trying not to scare someone smaller. Kiva noticed anyway. "They're taking me," he said. "Because fear loves certainty." "No," Elias said firmly. "No one is taking you without a fight." But the rumors had already reached Kiva's ears. Drakes were angry. A Drake envoy had filed complaint. They said Elias was weakening a hatchling, stealing him from his heritage, teaching softness. Kiva lay awake those nights with his tail wrapped tight, thinking, what if they're right? Warm beds made him calmer. Food made him heavier. Safety made him less sharp. Was that weakness? 2 days before the hearing, Kiva overheard Elias speaking to Dr. Cho. "They want him placed in a Drake austerity ward," Elias said, voice tight. "They're calling it proper care." Dr. Cho's reply was quiet and fierce. "Proper care doesn't include starvation." Kiva pressed his forehead to the wall and tried not to shake. The council chamber was built for intimidation. A curved dais. 6 species representatives. The station administrator, a tall arthropod with antennae that moved like punctuation presiding, with a voice that made the room sound smaller than it was. The Drake envoy stood at the center. His scales were deep green, polished to mirror sheen. His horns curved with adult authority. His eyes were gold and cold. "My name is Varrock," he announced. This human interfered with Drake law. The hatchling was under trial by endurance. His clan deemed him unfit. Elias kept Kiva's claw in his hand. "He wasn't under trial," Elias said evenly. "He was abandoned." Varrock's nostrils flared. "You dare judge our way?" "I judge leaving a 4-year-old to die," Elias said. "Call it what you want." That's what it was. Murmurs rippled across the dais. A representative from the Cephalopod Trade Guild spoke. "This seems internal." A human counselor stood, voice sharp. "A child's welfare isn't internal." Varrock's gaze pinned Kiva. "You have filled him with weakness. Drakes must be tempered." Elias squeezed Kiva's claw once gentle. "Ask him," Elias said. "Ask what he wants." Silence fell like a lid. Kiva stood on trembling legs. He remembered bargaining lessons. He remembered that fear didn't mean he had to disappear. "I tried," he said, voice quiet but clear. "I lived in vents. I ate gel. I sold everything I had. I was cold and scared all the time." He lifted his chin, though his throat tightened. If that's what being proper means, then I don't want it. Varek's expression hardened. See? Corruption. Kiva's voice rose, not loud but solid. I was dying. Elias fed me. He kept me warm. He taught me I have value even when I'm not perfect. He looked up at the dais. How is that corruption? The administrator's antennae twitch. Rapidly, the council withdrew for deliberation. Kiva sat beside Elias and tried not to cry. After what felt like a lifetime, the administrator returned. We extend temporary guardianship by 3 months, the administrator said. We require further observation before permanent ruling. It wasn't safety, but it wasn't. Separation. Elias hugged Kiva right there in the chamber. I'm not letting them take you, whispered. Kiva wanted to believe him. That night he had nightmares anyway. He woke crying and ran to Elias's room. Elias was already awake. He lifted the blankets. Without a word, Kiva crawled in beside him. 3 months passed, and Kiva learned what living felt like. Breakfast at the small table. Snacks packed for later. School at the Human Colony Center. A teacher who treated his questions like they mattered. Children who didn't care that his wings were different. A girl who drew him in 100 styles. A boy who wanted to know whether meteor rocks tasted different in Drake Mouse. They did not. Kiva tried anyway. After school, Kiva waited for Elias's shift to end, then walked home beside him, chattering about lessons while Elias listened like each word was a gift. Kiva grew healthier. His scales shone again. His eyes looked less haunted. Then one night, under the heat lamp, Kiva asked the question that had been clawing at him. What if I don't want to be like drakes are supposed to be? Elias didn't answer immediately. Then he said, being Drake is part of you. I'll never ask you to erase that. But tradition should protect children, not punish them. Kiva swallowed. What am I then? Elias smiled softly. You're Kiva. That's enough. In the dark, Kiva whispered, Can I call you Dad? Silence stretched. Then Elias's voice came back rough. I'd be honored. Dad. The word felt like a door opening. 2 weeks before the final hearing. 3 drake hatchlings appeared near the human center, thin, frightened. Eyes too old for their faces. Word had spread. The humans didn't hesitate. Homes opened. Food appeared. Dr. Cho treated infections. School enrollment forms were filled out. Kiva watched in awe as kindness replicated itself like light. One small blue hatchling clung to him and whispered, Does it stop hurting? Kiva thought of Deck 17. The vents. The gel. Then he thought of breakfast plates and laughter and Dad's hand steadying his claw. It gets easier, he said. They make it easier. The final hearing filled the chamber. Teachers testified. Doctors presented records. Human parents described how their children had learned compassion from Drake classmates. Kiva stood and spoke without shaking this time. I'm happy, he said. I'm healthy. I'm learning. Dad didn't steal my heritage. He gave me room to decide what kind of Drake I want to be. When it was Varek's turn, the green-scaled envoy stood slowly. I came here certain, he said. Certain that hardship was the only forge of strength. He glanced at the 3 newly arrived hatchlings, now cleaner. Fed, sitting upright instead of curled inward. I was wrong about one thing, Varek admitted. Voice measured. Survival is not the same as thriving. The chamber went still. Varek inclined his head. I withdraw my objection. The vote was unanimous. Full guardianship. Adoption rights approved. Kiva's chest loosened as if someone had cut a tether. He'd been dragging his whole life. Elias lifted him into a hug without caring who watched. Kiva hugged back with claws gripping fabric like it was real. Afterward, Varek approached. Up close, He was even larger than Kiva remembered. But his eyes were less cold. "You endured alone," Varek said quietly. "That took strength." Kiva braced. "And you accepted help," Varek continued. "That took courage we Drakes rarely honor." Kiva's eyes stung. Varek's voice softened further. "Perhaps we have mistaken loneliness for virtue." Then he stepped back, and the space he left behind felt lighter. That evening, Elias pulled out the adoption documents. "If you want," he said, "you can take my name." Kiva traced the letters carefully. "Will I still be Drake?" he asked, because part of him still feared the price of belonging. "You'll always be Drake," Elias said. "This just means you're also my son." Kiva nodded once. "Both," he decided. "I like both." They signed together, Elias in human script, Kiva in a careful claw-marked dot. It felt like building something that could last. Months later, their home no longer echoed. Heat lamps glowed in corners. Reinforced chairs bore scratch marks and survived. A shelf held Drake heritage texts beside human children's stories. The balcony had 2 blankets always folded and ready. Kiva did well at school. Not because he was the smartest, though he was quick, but because he noticed who felt left out and pulled them into the circle. He knew what it meant to not belong. He made sure others belonged anyway. One night, on the balcony, Elias pointed at the star fields beyond the station windows and told Kiva stories about old colonies and new worlds. "You know," Elias said softly, "if I'd taken a different corridor that day." Kiva leaned against his side, warm and safe. "Then I'd still be trying to prove I deserved to exist." Elias's arm tightened around his shoulders. "And I'd still be pretending I didn't need anyone." Kiva stared at the stars. "Humans are strange," he said, and there was affection in it now. "You keep the ones who struggle." Elias chuckled. "Yeah, we do." They sat in comfortable silence until Kiva noticed movement below on the lower deck. Near the edge of the market, a small figure drifting alone. Kiva tugged Elias's sleeve and pointed. Elias followed his gaze. His expression changed soft. Alert, already deciding. Together, they stood. Together. They went down, because once you've learned how to choose someone, you don't unlearn it. And on a station full of 1,000 worlds, kindness could be its own kind of law.